Greetings, everyone, and welcome to TRG 30. I'm Jill Robinson, and TRG 30 is the place where every week we are talking about bold change for our sector's resilience and long-term sustainability today. Today, we're going to be talking about something that some of you undoubtedly think is old school, while others of you are benefiting mightily from your long-term relationships right now. We're talking subscription and membership and the business case for them with our guest, Robbie Kellman Baxter, whom I'll introduce in a moment. But first, before we go, as always, I want to cue you up to listen for some things. First, attitudes. Attitudes. What is your organizational or your attitude about loyalty or loyalty programs? Second, assess. We're going to be talking about practices here. So consider how your organization has or is considering practices around loyalty as Robbie and I talk, and then decide, what are your organization's priorities? If it is in fact renewable customer or patron income, then there are a set of actions that want to follow. And so we'll want to talk about and will what those actions might be. So now I'd like to introduce you to our guest for today, author Robbie Kellman Baxter. I first met you when I listened to a Harvard Business Review podcast about loyalty, and you were on talking about your new book titled The Forever Transaction, How to Build a Subscription Model So Compelling Your Customers Will Never Want to Leave. Robbie's a renowned expert on the topic, actually coined the term membership economy, which was also the title of her first book. You can learn more about her in the links we provided prior to this session. We'll provide them again after, but right now, Robbie, I want to welcome you to our conversation today and to this room today. In many ways, I hope you feel like this place is like old home week. We certainly have people who are familiar with the concept of subscription and membership. Welcome to you.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
In fact, this is an important point that I'm going to come back to. Arts and culture has quite literally for decades deployed, honored, often cherished the concepts of loyalty. And I'm going to come back to that. We're going to come back to arts and culture, but there is no question that in business, this concept of subscription and membership has boomed. I think it was a couple of years ago, I saw an article in the Harvard Business Review about how since 2011, I think the subscription model had grown by something like 200%. Why? What's happening here?
Well, I think that corporations and companies are aware of the power of loyalty and engagement and predictable recurring revenue, something that I think many of the people tuning in today have been doing for a long time. And they're recognizing the power of that. The public markets are giving much higher valuations, 5 to 7 times the valuations for subscription revenue versus episodic or transactional revenue. And so it's no surprise that everybody wants to do it. But what I think is different now is that it's easier to do it than ever before. There's been an explosion in the kinds of supporting technologies that allow virtually any kind of organization to use tools like, subscription billing, customer success services, churn management, passive churn management, digital community. All of these features can now be accessible across time and space. And so everybody is starting to play with them to get some of that subscription revenue, which is a signal for loyalty.
Subscription revenue, renewable revenue, which is a signal for loyalty. Okay, so your book talks about something you call the forever promise, which sort of weaves into this question, supporting question I've got about whether this is a product, a subscription product, or a way. So can you just give us your take on this forever promise idea and its elements?
Yeah. So the forever promise is what your organization promises to what I call your best members, the people that you want to stay with you for a long time, where you think you're offering value on an ongoing basis for them. And it's basically you saying, as long as this is a goal for you, or you're trying to solve this problem, we are going to continue to evolve our offering to help you on that journey. That's our promise. And the subscription is a pricing tactic. It's just a way of packaging your value. You don't need to have subscription pricing to have a forever promise, but without a forever promise that is relevant to your members, you're never going to enjoy predictable subscription revenue.
So forever promise says we are thinking long term. We are going to constantly adapt to serve you, the customer. It really does put the customer at the center here. And you literally recommend that organizations draft a forever promise, which suggests it's a way of doing business, not a, to your point, a tactic called a subscription
Right.
program. So in arts and culture, you're familiar with, have participated in the kind of organizations that are in the room today. I wonder who designs this forever promise. Is it, in our parlance, is it artists? Is it the board? Is it the staff? Who leads this forever promise way and idea?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And of course, I'm a consultant, so I'm going to say it depends.
Yeah.
Uh, but it's important, I think, that all three of those constituencies are involved, even if they are not doing the heavy lifting of the testing and the experimentation and the design of the offering. It's different from a mission. Sometimes people, think about it as a brand promise or a mission. It's different because it's from the customer perspective.
Mm.
So you're thinking, why are they joining? And they may be joining because they believe in your mission and they want to support you. And I'm guessing that many of you have this challenge, which I've seen in a lot of places, where some of your members are joining because they want to support you. Whatever you're doing, they want to support you because they believe in your organization, whether or not they attend your events, whether or not they take advantage of the subscription features. And then there are other people who are like, no, I'm here for my front row seat. I'm here to go backstage. I'm here for the special events and the free champagne. And understanding the differences and who you're optimizing for is really, really important.
Okay, so arts and culture, let's stay here. And this room has people in it who have vast experience with, organizations have had vast experience with lots of loyalty programs, from membership programs with varying levels of access to service and benefits and experiences, to subscription programs with seats and events that I choose or are chosen for me, point systems, all access passes. I mean, the loyalty concept has been a fundamental part of this sector for a long time. And yet, there are some questions that in 2020, this field has about loyalty programs, and I want to delve into them. The first one is this: we hear this now quite a lot. Clients will say to me, Jill, we make the subscription can't work in 2020 for us. We make it way too hard. We ask people to come to us. And if you look at those examples that Harvard Business Review cites, it's the Netflix delivered digitally, delivered to my home. I, as the consumer, don't have to do the amount of work that we ask our patrons to do. So what's your response to that? What's your experience say?
So first of all, I would say a subscription's a tactic. It's like saying email doesn't work for us, right? Like, well, email works great for communicating one-on-one with your colleagues. Email can work great as a marketing tool. Email can work great as a way to package value where there's actual content, not marketing, but actual value in the email. But saying email doesn't work because a particular email campaign didn't work is kind of crazy. Subscription is just a tactic. It's one way of building a predictable relationship, an ongoing relationship with somebody who wants an ongoing relationship with your organization. And when you describe some of the issues that your members have brought up or your clients have brought up, so, what I hear is they're saying, I'm not necessarily getting the way that you organization have chosen to package value is not in my best interest. I don't believe that you're going to deliver on that promise. That I think there's a better way to deliver on the promise. So if the promise is, I want to be engaged in theater, I want to see the latest shows and feel current, right?
Right.
You can do that digitally. You can do that with specific events. You can do that with partnerships with other organizations. If they say, I want to get to know what goes on behind the scenes, that's a little different. So really being clear on what they're trying to accomplish and then how you package the value. Are you having a product problem? That is, you've bundled the wrong services together, or are you reaching the wrong people? Or do the right people not even know you exist or not understand your promise?
Yeah, okay. So I think about the Disneys of the world and the sports teams of the world. And what I know is that those kinds of experiences where I have to get in my car and go can be and are successful in terms of their loyalty offer. But my suspicion is they're listening hard, and your point is well taken. There are multiple channels, multiple elements of those experiences that those organizations are delivering to different constituents. That must be true.
Yeah, absolutely. And people absolutely get in their cars to go to, I mean, not right now in COVID times, we can get
Right.
into that,
Right.
but people are willing. I mean, people go to, there's theme parks that have subscriptions, there's car washes that have subscriptions, there's, the NBA, season ticket holders, they also have a digital subscription, League Pass. There's subscriptions that tie in other benefits, like the ability to connect with fellow fans, the ability to see things behind, what goes on kind of behind, backstage. So there's lots of ways of creating value. So if you have a long-time subscription and it's not working, what I would advise you to do is try to understand what the problem is. Is it that your existing members are canceling? They don't want to subscribe anymore. And if so, is that because they've used up the product and they're like, it's not new anymore? Is it because they've found a better solution? I'm now subscribing elsewhere or now accessing content elsewhere. Or is it because something earlier in the cycle? Is it that they joined and never felt welcome? Is it that they joined and they couldn't quite figure out how to tap into the value? Like, I paid for all these tickets, but I never made it to the shows. And now I feel bad about myself because I wasted it. Right. Understanding and pinpointing exactly where the problems are and then solving those one at a time is a really useful exercise. And the other thing to think about that I see with a lot of organizations is they say, no, Robbie, our loyal members are still loyal. They've been subscribing for 25 years and they're going to subscribe for another 25 years. Our problem is young people aren't joiners. They don't do things the way that their parents did. And what I would say there is maybe there's a little truth to that, but a lot of times what I see is young people are in fact joiners. They love to subscribe, hence, those numbers you shared at the beginning, but they may not believe that your offering is optimized for them.
Okay. So one of the most compelling parts of your book is where you talk about the sort of the traps that we can fall in executing, and one of them is this thing called aging. You call it aging,
Yeah.
where your loyal members become the focus of an organization, and you forget to stay relevant to new audiences and engage new audiences in a loyalty conversation. You've just highlighted, I mean, in our sector, subscription has gotten, and membership both, have gotten a little bit of a bad rap because the perception and reality is that those loyalists are old, primarily white, primarily wealthy. And today, what we all know is that the future of arts and culture, rests really on our connecting with our communities who increasingly are diverse and younger. And so this belief, follows through in action where the subscription can be subordinated in favor of spending time and money on acquisition, and there's a tension there.
Yeah. So first of all, I want to acknowledge that the tension between acquisition and retention exists not just in this world, in the arts world, but also in the world of news, also in the world of professional associations and societies, country clubs. Any organization that has enjoyed the benefits of membership for a long time has probably suffered to some extent from an aging cohort. In other words, when you launched, you brought in a bunch of new members when they were probably young and new. They grew up with your organization. And as they were loyal, what everybody says is, listen to your customer, take care of your member. So a lot of organizations start to kind of put on blinders and focus with their microscope on their current members and not use, their telescope and look out on who's going to be tomorrow's members.
Right.
And how can we evolve our offering given all the changes that are possible with technology and what other people are doing, other organizations are doing. And so you kind of focus more narrowly and more and more narrowly on today's members. And that is exacerbated in nonprofits where the board is made up of your super users, your most engaged members.
Right.
So they're not, in many cases, not all cases, they're not trained board directors. They're super fans. And so they're thinking not about the health of the organization, but rather what they think would be great. They're thinking with their hearts and their kind of their own mindset instead of saying, how do I make sure this organization thrives into the next generation?
Boy, that therein lies a really spot on commentary. And the thing that I would want this group to hear is that this is about math, the math of sustainable long-term income that can fuel. And many of you in this room see that fuel because those subscribers and donors and members have stayed with you, allowed you to hang on to the money that they've invested. And we have an obligation to be thinking about the right invitation to new and different audiences and patrons and customers who may value very different things. But it doesn't mean that the subscription or membership isn't the right tactic. I want to pivot really quickly, Robbie, excuse me, we could talk for 2 hours, to Stephen, if you can bring up a poll really quickly. The issue of how and who manages and leads loyalty. So those of you in this room, just respond to what you think is true. What's true in your organization? Are your operational teams well coordinated around the customer and patron? This is a Robbie, Kellman, Baxter point, do you always speak when you're in meetings as if the customer and patron is in the room with you? Do your artistic and curatorial teams regularly engage with your customer teams, box office, marketing, and philanthropy? Or is this a place where you read those statements and you think, we don't do that much at all in our organization? Robbie, the point here is there's tension about not just whether we should, but then who owns it. And I think in arts and culture, we tend to believe that we're super siloed and uniquely siloed. And I think you see this tension in lots of places.
Yeah, absolutely. So in fact, one of the biggest challenges, and I talk about this in my books, is that organizations are structured in such a way that they're not aligned around the member journey. So in your case, for example, people join, right? People come on one-off occasions, right? They have episodic relationship with you. They come to one event, and then there are people who become members who sign up, and then there are people who become really loyal, and then there are people who become major donors, going beyond just the subscription to really contributing at a very deep level. And those are often siloed, right? And then the content, the product, is run by a totally separate team.
Yeah, okay.
And these discussions need to be shared around that customer and around both the goals of the organization and also the goals of your members. And it'll lead to some, I'm sure, heated discussions. I've seen this, for example, in the newsroom, right? Mm-hmm. Where a lot of news organizations will say, hey, the news is sacred and it's not commercial. You guys go do your commercial thing, create a subscription, whatever you want. We're going to keep writing the exact same stories. But the reality is you're going to create different stories if your goal is to get somebody to click versus if your goal is to get somebody to subscribe, right?
Yeah.
And further, if you're trying to get, older white people to subscribe, you might have slightly different content than if you're trying to introduce a young and diverse audience to the concept of newspapers. Like one of the issues that we found in newspapers, which I found kind of funny, but so obvious, is that when they put pictures of younger people and diverse people into the stories, more young and diverse people subscribed.
That is so relevant to this particular group. And I don't know if you can see the poll, but I just want to say that almost 60% of the group here says they're pretty well coordinated operationally. 44% said artistic and curatorial teams are engaging, so less than half have that reality. And 23% say, look, we're not doing much of this at all. So I know, Stephen, that we're going to have questions of Robbie, and I want to make sure we get to them, but we're not alone. And that newspaper example is a really rich one as I think about even the impact of photography, actors on stage, musicians in the orchestra, photos in brochures.
Yeah. Board members. I mean, another idea is this concept of I've seen this happen in the association side. They call it like a shadow board, where it's just young members. And maybe you're not ready to say, let's put young members on our, governing board, but let's hear them. Let's hear their voices. Let's have our board mentor somebody really different from them. I spoke to the AICPA, which is the Society of Chartered Public Accountants. One of the things that they found was that their best volunteers were usually brought in by a mentor. That in other words, the partner in charge of the firm said, hey, young Robbie, you need to come with me to the CPA Society meeting. And by the way, you need to volunteer. That's what people do. And that's going to bring you so much meaning and so much learning. You're going to be glad you did it, but you need to do it.
Yep. Stephen, bring in the voices of the folks here.
Yeah. Some good questions coming in. But I think where we'd start is that after this conversation, I think many people may feel motivated at this time to look into what next steps they can take. We're working with clients, right? This is a moment to perhaps look at this. What Patrick says is it an organization that needs to move from years of one-off season booking to building a season and subscription model. And some of us have models, as you've discussed, that maybe there's an opportunity to refresh. What first steps would you recommend people take?
I would recommend first step is take a step back, look at who you want as your best members. Who are which members do you want to make more of? And say, what is it that they want from us? Why did they come to us in the first place? And what is the journey that they're on? Are they trying to be more cultured? Are they trying to give back? Are they trying to educate their children? What is the reason they came in the first place? And then build from there. Say, how can we create more touch points and solve a bigger part of their problem? And it may be with season tickets, it may be with, like you said, some kind of, currency that you create, you get a certain number of chits that allow you to attend certain events that have different prices or what have you. But by starting with what are they trying to do? Why does somebody come in the first place? Where do they go? And how do we anticipate that journey and provide a membership that supports it?
We've got several questions around diversity and inclusion here. This is obviously a place that's important, and I'm going to try and condense a couple of these together. Bradley says, connecting your insights with renewed realization that we in the benchmark arts have a lot of work to do around inclusion. What does forever promise mean for how our core programming has to change during this time? How do we present seasons which invite diverse groups of our society to feel ownership of our institutions and have the desire to be those best members who want to return? And Jacqueline says, How do subscriptions fit into organizations that are working on redirecting their efforts to focus on accessibility and anti-racism? By nature, subscriptions can be elitist, perhaps limited to those who can afford them. How do we continue to loyalty programs without ignoring those who can't pay the same amount? So I wonder if you can mesh those questions together as you respond.
Yeah, these are great. So I think these all fall into the category of we're trying to attract and serve a different audience. And our primary concern is not always going to be revenue. Those are sort of the two things that I take away from that. So when you're designing your memberships, you want to think about what is the journey that the kind of people we want to attract and engage, what is it that they would be coming to us for? And looking in the mirror and saying, how well are we able to deliver on that promise? And there's lots of tactical ways to do that I could advise. I'm sure you're doing many of them. Diverse staff, diverse events, that you choose for your season. Getting diverse voices on your volunteer group, lowering prices or memberships for certain groups at certain life stages, or in certain circumstances. So lots of organizations have, student memberships, but it's not just pricing taking the same membership and saying now it's half price for students or it's free for students, but actually having different benefits. Mm-hmm. Students are in a very different life stage than a, 60-year-old or 65-year-old person who has, more discretionary money and time.
It reminds me of one of those the problem traps that we get in that you call taking shortcuts and not thinking about the long term. So what I hear Robbie say is, let's identify, think be in the mind of the people and talk to the people whom we want to connect with, and then think long term, not about extracting this year's annual income, but the long term relationship. That's another trap. Stephen, one more maybe before we go.
I think on that as well, Tracy comments around, who are those that are providing direct customer service and that are listening to our patrons all the time, right? And how we can listen to feedback from there. Jill, there's just a clarifying question, and I wonder, Robbie, if you ever thought on this around the difference in the value between subscription and membership. I mean, some cultural organizations have both, some have one, some see merit in one or the other. Is there anything you'd say about or?
Yeah, subscription is a pricing tactic. You're saying if you pay something per month or per year, you get something in exchange per month or per year. It's just a pricing tactic. It's not a strategy. And that's, I think, where people are getting maybe tripped up, is that it's not bad or good by itself. But what's important is your membership mindset. Who are you there to serve for the long term? And how are you optimizing the experiences that you offer to achieve that goal for those people?
Yeah. Okay, so I want to take us to next steps here for a moment. Robbie, we always wrap up with some tactics and steps that folks can take, and they include these. Tackling your forever promise with your leadership team, including your artists and board. Describe and define, and it could be different by different segment and different cohort, but have a conversation about what that might mean. Assume more than one audience. Really dig into what do you know, what are you learning that new audiences might need. It will be different than your longtime loyalists, no doubt. Consider your retention resources. We are on an acquisition mindset right now, and this is about the math of long-term recurring revenue that can come with different kinds of patrons and audience types. So we've got to think about retention, and service is retention. Sometimes we think of service as a benefit. Service is part of the retention program. You heard Robbie mention it. It's 2020. We're going to have to chart a path to investing in the technology that can support especially new audiences and their expectations, and settling on the metrics that matter. I recommend highly that you pick up this book. It's very much a how-to, step-by-step set of questions about how to both start and redesign a loyalty program. Next up on TRG 30 are these events. Next week, as Dr. Dr. Michael Maddouse. We'll be talking with him about the resiliency that you have and your organization has. And before we go, what is now an element of TRG 30 is our data corner. And this is from our COVID sector benchmark. Look, we are benefiting from our loyalists right now. So compared to 2019, your sales volume is down, but boy, your super active patrons are proportionally more engaged than they were before. Congratulations, you've done a good job of talking to them, but the new audiences are a much smaller proportion of sales. So how can we take from this conversation today and use some of the techniques you heard Robbie talk about to engage and continue to develop relationships with those new audiences that are smaller proportionally and that we must continue relationships with as we move through and beyond this pandemic. Thank you for joining me. Always check our website for new tools, events, and ways that we can support you. Robbie, Kellman, Baxter, thank you so much for helping us rediscover the power in the math of loyalty, membership, subscription. It is about the math. It's also about relationships and sustaining them. Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for joining us for TRG 30.
It's been a pleasure.